and welcome to the Itinerary. In today's episode, we will be exploring space tourism, one of my favourite sectors that is currently a hot topic in our industry. And it's been a hot topic in the international media for over the past few months as we celebrated the inaugural space flights of both Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin. So we're here at the Itinerary, decided to rustle up some local experts to help us understand more about the possibilities of space transport and tourism. So please welcome Mark Rocket, CEO of Kia Aerospace and President of Aerospace Christchurch, and Emeline, Paat-Dahlstrom, and Eric Dahlstrom, the founders of Space Base. When I think about the space industry, New Zealand is far from my mind. Why are you three based here?
It is a global industry, and there's a lot happening in New Zealand. It's the economic activity of New Zealand space industry is actually larger than the New Zealand wine industry, and so there's new things happening all the time. It's more than just Rocket Lab launching routinely. It's also lots of people creating spacecraft sensors and using data from space.
And then also just personally, we came to New Zealand about 4 years ago as Edmund Hillary Fellows, and our real focus is the democratization of access to space for developing and emerging countries, of which we think that New Zealand actually ticks a lot of the boxes for having a sustainable space potential industry and economy for the future.
And Mark, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, we're adding to that, we're the 11th country to reach orbit. We're the first country in the world to not have a large military industrial complex, a large government-run space program behind us to get to orbit. So it kind of shows that, as a country, you don't actually have to have all that infrastructure to be able to do something in the space industry at the current time. So, I think the way that New Zealand is situated in many areas, we do have a fantastic opportunity to look at things with a blank piece of paper, to look at innovation, look at this new technology, and look at our sort of geopolitical, geographic advantages.
Space tourism seems like a topic of a sci-fi movie, but I was surprised to learn it's actually been around for a couple of decades now. Emeline and Eric, you worked at Space Adventures, which is basically a space tourism agency for the super wealthy, and you and Eric were there to witness the flights of the first ever space tourist, Dinas Tito, in 2001. What can you tell us about your experience?
I actually think that that's still probably the highlight of my career, and that happened about 20 years ago. It was 2001 when Dinas Tito, considerably the first tourist to have gone up in space. Now, remember that before he flew, and any human who's gone in space have either gone in through a space agency or a big commercial company that is sending sort of like payload participants to space. And he's the first one who's kind of like put down a ticket or bought a ticket to go to space. When we were in Baikonur, he launched from the same launch pad as Yuri Gagarin on a Soyuz rocket, which is a derivative of the Vostok, which is kind of like the same rocket that Gagarin went up. And it was just like very surreal to be working for a startup company at that time, Space Adventures, and being able to broker kind of like this historical event that I think created the path forward for space tourism.
That's just exciting just to hear that by itself. So with space tourism already being around, what makes Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin such groundbreaking achievements, Mark?
Yeah, we're trying to commercialize that and take that to a wider market is what it's all about. These are only suborbital flights, so you're not quite getting up into orbit, which will be a much more dynamic experience. But even getting into suborbital space, experiencing rocket-powered flight and zero gravity and seeing the Earth from space would be a fantastic experience. So I think it's really exciting that we're finally seeing these kind of space lines kicking off, and in the same way that early last century, we had commercial airlines kicking off. Now we're at that point with space lines. So I think the next 20 years, 30 years are going to be really interesting to watch how that all evolves. And I think in time, people will make decisions about, do they want to go climb Everest or go to Europe or go to space? It'll be something that will be a choice for many people.
There's also a big difference between those early space tourists going on the Soyuz, is that and for the extra seat on the Soyuz, the right-hand seat, you had to basically train in Russia for 6 months. It's sort of like as though the first airline passengers had to become pilots and sit in the cockpit in order to fly an Airbus. And that was, so they basically trained and became a full cosmonaut. And that was a huge barrier to becoming a space tourist. But now these new vehicles are basically like an airplane. You just have to know how to buckle your seatbelt. And so that's what Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, and also, and even the new, the Dragon vehicle for SpaceX, the new, so it opens it up for lots more people.
I wanted to also point out that the biggest difference between the flights 20 years ago and now is that even though they were considered space tourism flights, they were still on government-owned rockets, so Soyuz, whatever other vehicles. While today they're now purely commercial, and then the other point as well is that they're now reusable or refurbishable, which really is a whole nother ball game because now with commercial, they have their own schedule, they have their own timelines, they can go to whatever the location or destination that they would want, unhindered by kind of like government schedules or sort of like government bureaucracy.
And obviously it's been well contested. Should it be regulated to a different standard than what it currently is? Because I know where they go to the threshold at the moment, that's regulated under FAA rules in America. And obviously the private vehicles, commercial vehicles. What are your thoughts on one becoming more sustainable as a industry that uses quite a lot of gas, and also on regulations around space tourism?
One thing I'd like to address is like environmental impact of these rocket launches. It's not zero, of course, but it's a lot of the carbon footprint is based on the size of the fuel tank. And so Blue Origin flights, for example, you have to fly several of them to equal one typical aircraft flight. So it's if you add up all the rocket flights, that have happened, they're still small compared to, for example, Auckland Airport. And so it's not zero, but it's pretty small compared to the other users of fossil fuels on the planet. But as far as regulations, in the US, they have had this window of where they tried to let the industry develop without trying to certify vehicles and things like that. And we'll see how in the next few years if there's going to be any kind of changes for that.
And also to add as well, I think this is sort of like following the footsteps of the airline industry, where in the pioneering years, of course, they're experimental and then not everybody's allowed to kind of like do it. But at the same time, it became commoditized, and then the rules and regulations are then fit for commercial passengers. So now we don't even think twice when we go on a plane. We don't sign a waiver, just like when we do bungee jumping or doing extreme sports, because it became just like the norm. So we're hoping that this industry kind of like mimics that in the future, and we'll kind of like have the same really easy way of flying, just like what we have with the airline industry.
Yeah. Do we think that space tourism is only ever going to be for the rich? Because I think most of us would love the opportunity to get up there. I know I would. Mark, I know you've got your ticket booked on Virgin Galactic, I believe, you lucky thing. Do we believe it's going to be just for the rich, though?
Yeah, well, certainly it's going to be a lot more accessible in the future. I think the first few thousand people are going to be paying a little bit more of a premium, but I think the price will come down steadily. In the same way, I remember when I was a lot younger, flying to Europe was very expensive. The price has come down a lot now. I think with the innovation of technology, the competitiveness of the market, you'll definitely see it being a lot more accessible to a huge group of people.
I'm hoping one day that means it's accessible for me. What do you all think is the possibility for the future of space tourism? I'll start with Eric with this one, because I'm particularly keen for you to comment on the likelihood of a space hotel, given your experience with the design of the International Space Station.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the space station, it's basically a building in space, and we're still in the early days of what we can construct in space. And there are people that are working on space hotels right now. And a big aspect of these initial flights of space tourists is that it's sort of proving the market. People willing to pay? How many people will pay? Because the global, spending power in tourism is so huge that, tourists around the world spend all the government space budgets every weekend, and so if you can actually provide a service, make a business model of a space hotel, then there certainly is the spending power to be able to support that. And a lot of these tourist flights are demonstrating the market and convincing the investors that they can now invest in the next stage. And one early estimate was there was a potential for 60 space hotels, and that would still be the first 4% of the market.
So also going back to like 20 years ago, the only destination there is, of course, the International Space Station. And Eric mentioned about today there are different commercial companies, Axiom, Nanoracks, used to be also Bigelow Aerospace. So they're actually working on commercial stations and hotels and potentially research stations. So those are now destinations. But then also there are destinations where you can just go on a loop around the moon, which is this Space Adventures actually offers today. You can go on a much higher orbit than the ISS. And then also in the future with SpaceX thinking about and also Blue Origin going to the moon and also to Mars, and those are going to be potential destinations for people. I mean, today, well, yeah, right now we have kind of like more of a joyride of suborbital flights as we test kind of like the appetite of people to do this, just like skydiving and bungee jumping. But then I think as the technology gets better and then the way that we go out in space gets a little bit more reliable, then I think there's going to be a lot more destinations, not just in near Earth or moon or Mars, but maybe even out towards the asteroid belt.
And Mark, what's your view on the future of space tourism?
Yeah, I think we'll be doing suborbital flights as the sort of key focus over the next few years. Then hopefully orbital flights will open up in due course. I mean, it's a lot harder to get to orbit. I don't think people kind of realize the difference. For example, people say to me, "Oh, when are you going to the moon?" There's a big difference between a suborbital flight and getting to the moon. But I think certainly the orbital capability is going to open up so many interesting opportunities. And I think for the technology development of developing sustainable habitats in space are going to have so many kind of cross-pollination flow-on effects to our everyday lives here on Earth. People are going to be investing a lot of money to make things more sustainable. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see that technology being developed and then end up helping people on Earth as well. But I'm really excited about the slingshots around the moon. I think once you are in orbit, it is relatively easy to just burn a little bit more fuel and slingshot around the moon. I think that'll be just an incredible experience. So if that happens in my lifetime, I'd be incredibly excited about that kind of opportunity. But certainly you've got Elon Musk and other people thinking about Mars, and maybe there's going to be colonies on Mars and in the coming decades. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Maybe they want to get a whole lot of people there to Mars. I mean, you're going to have to stay there for a while, so you're going to have to make a fairly severe dedication to the mission. You might not come back for a while, But I think there's going to be a lot of adventurous spirits that would want to take on that mission and help explore the solar system.
There's got to be benefits here for people on Earth for, the more times that we explore space, there's got to be more benefits for us here on Earth. Obviously, Elon Musk has been looking at doing different kinds of travel as well. So get from New York to Auckland, for instance, by going into space and then coming back down. What's all your view on what would the benefits be for us? But also, there's different kinds of technology being looked at here, and obviously different ways of using space as a way to actually transport us and probably bring it to the forefront of tourism.
Yeah, I think the solar system holds all the resources that we need. As the population of the planet is growing, we can harvest all the energy that we need, all the minerals. We don't need to kind of mine the Coromandel or wherever. We can basically mine the solar system. I think as we actually learn to colonize and have long-term habitations in space, it means that we have to look at making sure that there is a kind of circular loop of environmental systems, and that's going to help everything on Earth, because obviously that's one of the main problems, that we are creating a lot of junk and aren't recycling as much as we should be. So I think there's going to be huge flow-on effects, and it'll change our kind of mindset, that we need to kind of think about, a balanced life where we, what we bring into our life, and, maybe we kind of need to think about our outputs a lot more as well.
I think one benefit from the tourism also is just more routine flights and lowering the cost of access to space. And that for on the other side, what we're interested in is using satellites in space and to help on problems on Earth. And we're in the middle of running a space challenge that basically using the 200 satellite cameras of the Planet satellite constellation to monitor climate effects on climate change, and we have a $30,000 prize for students that will address these problems. So basically, there's lots of reasons to put satellites in orbit to address problems on Earth, and space tourism helps contribute to lowering the cost of launching these satellites and humans into space. And but I agree with Mark that in the long term, the resources in space are just tremendous. I think the future space hotels are going to be potentially built out of asteroid material, constructed as with 3D robots and printing robots, and so it's not going to be everything taken from Earth. It's going to be creating destinations in space, and then people wanting to visit them. And so it's the transformation in the future is just going to be astounding. I think and so that's why I think young people today are going to see really big changes in their lives.
And maybe to add on a more practical note on Earth, I think you mentioned about point to point. So I think that is sort of the holy grail, if you want to say it, where if we can have this space transportation accessible and cheap enough that it would disrupt also the airline industry, because now you can actually either go from one point to the other around the Earth for much faster. For humans, and then also for cargo, imagine DHL, FedEx that can get from Japan to the US in just barely
in
nothing
45 minutes or something.
In 45 minutes. So that's kind of like disrupts and transforms the way we think of transportation. And we have in terms of technology. So for example, here in New Zealand, there's a company called Dawn Aerospace, which is a space plane, and that sort of, they're not looking at human flight right now, but at least the technology can be kind of extended further to a potential point to point, because space planes are fully reusable. They can also fly and take off and land from any airport. So just like thinking of a space vehicle system that can do that, which just just the applications of that is just tremendous.
Just to add on to the point-to-point concept, Sir Richard Branson, he's an airline guy, and one of the key drivers he wanted to invest in the space line is because of this point-to-point scenario. He saw this as being a massive opportunity for the future, and that's one of the key drivers on why he invested in Virgin Galactic.
Do you all think that it's possible for New Zealand to get into the space tourism game even more than we already are? Are we in it?
We've been always thinking about, what would it take to do suborbital tourism from New Zealand. And one interesting aspect is that right now, launching from either Texas or New Mexico, when you launch up into space, you see a beautiful view of Texas or New Mexico, and so it's sort of like the pictures all look very similar. But if you actually launch from New Zealand, you would see both islands and in a most beautiful view, and so it's actually a better place for the experience if you were able to manage it. Now the trick is that we have to do all these potential examinations of where you could launch from and what company and
what's the implications on the environment as well, because sometimes we don't really think about all of these things, from sonic booms to how is it going to affect kind of like the ecology and the places where it's going to launch.
But like the testing center now is established near Christchurch is in partnership with Naitahu iwi, is the main focus is that it's a biological reserve, but in the same way that even Kennedy Space Center is a biological reserve, and they've managed to support wildlife in the middle of while they're launching rockets nearby. So it's I think there's a potential in the future, but it's a ways. There are a lot of things have to happen first.
Yeah, and even kind of like again, maybe future when we think of Rocket Lab also now working on bigger rockets, and my understanding is
the
that
neutron,
and my understanding is that they're working to make it human certified. So that's also kind of like another indication of where it might go.
I think in the first instance, maybe going to the Mahia Peninsula and trying to watch a launch is sort of one aspect of space tourism that we can touch on right now. And I think there's going to be a whole bunch of aerospace activity going on in the country. There's Project Tafaki, which has just started up, which is on the Kaiteriti spit here, just outside of Christchurch. And there's going to be a bunch of R&D, flight trials, that kind of thing going on. I mean, hopefully there's going to be some really interesting aerospace activity that people can watch. So I think initially it'll be a lot of uncrewed vehicles that are doing interesting things that we'll get to see what's going on, which would be really exciting. But yeah, maybe in the decades to come, we're going to see bigger pieces of hardware that are going to be launching humans into space. And why not New Zealand? If we're creating this exciting aerospace industry here, I'm sure we'll have a piece of the pie somehow.
Well, thank you, you three. You've been incredible today talking about space tourism, something that's very, very dear to my heart. And I think as we look up to that sky and dream about what all the possibilities are, I think Sir Richard Branson said it the best when he finally got up there, that finally we've unleashed something for us all to look forward to. I remember looking at Beyond 2000 as a kid, going, one day we might be up there. And, we're in the 2020s now, and it looks like it's a possibility. So thank you from us today. For our success story today, let's take a look at Virgin Galactic's inaugural flight.
5, 3, 2, 1, release. Fire.
Welcome to witnesses, you're clear to unstrap.
Welcome to space.
To all you kids down there, I was once a child with a dream, looking up to the stars. Now I'm an adult in a spaceship with lots of other wonderful adults looking down to our beautiful, beautiful Earth. To the next generation of dreamers, if we can do this, just imagine what you can do.
All right, everybody, look
Wow.
out the window. Don't miss apogee.
Oh my God.
Be quiet.
Woo! Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, this is unbelievable. This is too unbelievable. Wow. Oh, unbelievable. You are the man.
And please return to your seats and strap in. Approach and re-entry.
Okay.
Get back up.